All right. Thank you, David. I think that was a comprehensive overview of the proposed regulation. I'm going to talk briefly, I only have 15 minutes or so, about some of the possible solutions, certification, and also talk a little bit about Preferred by Nature Sustainability Program, which is a new program we just launched before Christmas, just after the publication of the EU proposal, as a tool, a potential tool to address some of the challenges that's currently mentioned in the EU proposal. As David also mentioned, the new regulation is going to replace the EU timber regulation. That also means that our experience as a recognized monitoring organization has been used to develop new systems that cover these new requirements in the proposed deforestation regulation. And that's mainly also, even though the scope has changed and there are differences in the regulation, as you saw in David's presentation, there are a lot of similarities in the due diligence process, the process to addressing risks in supply chains and accessing information. So the due diligence process, as we have here, is very much similar to the process used in the EU timber regulation. These steps in accessing or gaining access to information about the supply chain, about the origin, the risk assessment process to evaluate risks of non-conforming material entering supply chains, even though the risk assessment scope, of course, is changed, and also trying to mitigate these risks through different tools and different processes in the supply chains. There are some key challenges that David also highlighted that I think will be some of the key points to address that are new. And this is this issue. The first one is the issue of geolocalization of production. So how exactly this is going to be interpreted, it's still not fully clear, but there are some clear requirements in the current version of the regulation to have reference to where products are coming from, where they have been produced, and also the time period when they were produced. The second point here relates to the definition of deforestation free in terms of the risk assessment. I saw there were also some questions in the chatter here in the Q&A boxes about the definition of deforestation free or deforestation as such in the current proposal. So there will be definitely a lot of work to be done in trying to define clearly what deforestation free means, and also to conduct risk assessments of that issue, of that definition. I'm going to try to talk about certification a little bit here. Obviously, certification is also mentioned in the new proposed regulation as part of the tools. It's not going to be a green lane in this regulation either, so I don't think there will be any formal recognition of specific systems or schemes. That's in line with how EU have done with the EU timber regulation. So I expect that line will be continued, but it's obvious, and I think relevant to talk about certification, as it will probably still play a role as one of the main tools in terms of managing and mitigating risks in supply chains. So I have some examples here. These are some of all the schemes that exist. There's a lot of different certification schemes now that we are talking about all these different products, commodities. So the complexity is quite high here. Obviously, as I mentioned before, certification is part of the solution, but more clarity is probably needed from different schemes on their supply chain controls, especially the chain of custody systems, and also to define the clarity on deforestation and forest degradation. So deforestation will be about how do like agricultural commodity schemes define cutoff dates, for example. How will they define forest? Is that aligned with the EU proposal? And for timber certification schemes, you have the additional definitions of forest degradation, which will need to be aligned in some way. Also, there's the issue of legal versus illegal deforestation. Some schemes, agricultural commodity schemes, allow legal deforestation, where others allow both legal and or do not allow neither legal or illegal deforestation. So an example from soy, I have a few examples here of some schemes that cover some of the commodities that are included in the regulation. For soy is quite it's interesting, but it's different from several of the other commodities. There is a lot of different soy certification schemes out there. Here's just a few logos presented here. In Europe, the FEFAC guidelines for soy sourcing is seen as a key tool. The International Trade Chambers, ITC's homepage has also created a standards map where they have benchmarked different certifications, soy certification schemes against the FEFAC guidelines. So there you can actually see the benchmarking and sort through different schemes that meet the FEFAC guidelines. For soy, it's so here's a study from 2019. It's important to mention here that some of the schemes has already been updated since 2019. Also, the FEFAC soy sourcing guidelines is in a 2021 version. But important to note here that the FEFAC current guidelines allow legal conversion using national level cutoff dates for conversion. So this, in this case, would not be aligned with the current EU definition of deforestation, since that also bans legal deforestation. There is a desired criterion, which is not mandatory, which suggests not to allow soy from any form of conversion. You can see here the figure here, the study kind of rated the different schemes to have the levels of how they protect forest and biodiversity. And as you can see, there's a wide range of different approaches. So the point here is that there are many schemes out there, and in order to ensure compliance with the EU the EU Deforestation Regulation, there is a need to assess these schemes and ensure that they are in fact aligned with the definitions and deadline cutoff dates used in the regulation. Here's an example from Denmark, and it's just to exemplify the current status of the soy market in terms of traceability, which is the other key aspect I mentioned. You see here today in the lower left-hand corner here, this is a study from the Danish University Center effor. There's a link to it here. Unfortunately, the study itself is in Danish, but it's quite interesting, this figure. I think it's a kind of an overview of a proposed plan for the soy industry to transition from sourcing a lot of conventionally produced soy and soy that is certified covered by credits, which again would not meet the current EU proposal for being able to identify the location of the production area. So you can see that almost half the imports in Denmark of soy is from conventional sources, and the rest of the other 50% is covered by certification schemes, but the claims are bought through credit systems. So there's basically very, very little or no certified material that's actually imported through a mass balance or segregated systems. There are small amounts. For example, a pro-terror system has an identity preserved model that is being used by in smaller cases. Palm oil, that's a little bit more simple. I would say there's one main certification system, the RSPO. They do have no deforestation requirements in their standard. Just from looking at it, I saw that there could be some questions raised to their definitions of primary forest that they use here. Also, RSPO allows some types of forest to be converted after high conservation value and high carbon stock assessments, meaning that they do allow some levels of conversion of natural ecosystems when you are trying to avoid these high conservation values or high carbon stock areas. And again, the question would then be, how would that meet the EU definition of deforestation free in the proposed regulation? In terms of traceability, the RSPO in fact has several different models that they use in their traceability system. They do offer an identity preserved model. So it is actually possible to buy palm oil with the identity preserves, meaning that you can say exactly which farm or farms it comes from. So that could actually meet the current requirements in the EUDR. They also have other types of COC models, segregated mass balance, and also a book and claim system where you can buy credits. From timber, I have here mentioned the three bigger schemes that exist, the Sustainable Biomass Partnership, the PEFC and the FSC schemes. So in terms of deforestation, I would say that from looking at their definitions, they would all meet the current definition of the regulation. Also for degradation definition, I believe that they to a large extent meet the definitions in the proposal. But again, this is something where you would have to go in and look at some of the details to make sure that all national standards and the non-certified material, for example, being mixed into these systems comply with the requirements. In terms of traceability, only SBP currently has a online data transfer system where they can allow business-to-business transfer of data of materials from one entity to the other, which would allow to address the origin issue. FSC and PFC still rely on a paper-based chain of custody models, where there would have to be changes, I believe, to those systems before you could make available the type of data that's currently proposed by the EU. So I think the conclusion is that there are parts of the key problems that are posed by the EU regulation that are covered by these systems for most of the commodities. But there are certainly also issues that would still need to be addressed in some cases. So that, I know it's not super helpful, but you cannot say that you can just buy certified material. But this is, of course, a challenge that we have had also with timber for the EU timber regulation, that the legality issues and standards are different. The supply chain management and chain of custody systems are different. So there is still some work to be done there. Preferred by Nature was commissioned last year to create a study for the EU Commission. So this is available from the EU Commission website, where we have addressed mainly looking at wood certification systems, but also mentioning some of the issues that are relevant for other types of commodities or the certification of other types of commodities. The last section here is about preferred by nature sustainability framework. I'm going to try to do that briefly. I'm just going to tell you a little bit about what we have been working on the last couple of years in order to address sustainability for a broader range of commodities. We have created the sustainability framework based on our work with the EU timber regulation and our legal source program, which contains this due diligence approach. We then expanded the scope to other commodities, and we have expanded the scope of the framework itself to not only look at legality, but also to look more broadly at sustainability issues. So this is an overview of the framework. It's structured as a standard like many other standards. It has 4 principles dealing with the first one, management and business practices. The second one on people's well-being and human rights. Principle 3 on nature and environment. And the last principle 4 on greenhouse gas emissions reductions. And then there are criteria and indicators under that. What we have done also when the EU proposal came out, we tried to benchmark the framework against the regulation. So we have actually marked in the current version of our sustainability framework, we have linked, or we have highlighted with these flags and small tree, which of our indicators directly address some of the requirements of the EU Deforestation Regulation. In terms of commodities, as I said, we have expanded the scope of the commodities that we work with in terms of due diligence, and that can cover all the commodities, but not limited to the commodities that are also mentioned in the EU proposal. One of the things that differentiates the sustainability framework from traditional product certification standards is that we are trying to apply a flexible approach where the framework and the requirements in the sustainability framework can be used in different ways. So this illustration here illustrates that for example, a land manager, it could be a farm or a forest manager, they can use the sustainability framework directly in principle as a normal certification standard or product certification standard on site, evaluating their performance against the requirements in the framework, whereas a downstream entity like a trader, a manufacturer, even retailers can apply our due diligence system using a risk-based approach and then using the requirements of the sustainability framework as risk indicators instead of directly as performance indicators. So the system built around the sustainability framework and the requirements in that is flexible and can be used at any point in the supply chain. We've done that through different documents. Here are some of the documents that these are currently published. We are working on additional documents and templates and so on. We have the sustainability framework, which contains all the requirements, as I just showed, all the criteria and indicators. And then we have 2 substandards, which the number 2 here is system requirements for land managers. So if you're a land manager applying the sustainability framework, these are the quality management aspects of ensuring consistent implementation and meeting the requirements. Whereas the third one here are the requirements for supply chain due diligence, which is similar to our due diligence standard for the EU timber regulation, but of course expanded to contain and meet the requirements of the EU Deforestation Regulation, sorry. Then we have some terms and definitions, which explain some of the terms that are being used. I just wanted to highlight here that we are recognizing the efforts and the assurance that can be provided by all types of certification schemes, being it voluntary, public, or even private verification schemes conducted by companies. So we are working on benchmarking existing schemes against the sustainability framework, which we will use in the process, where in the risk-based process we work with companies. We would use these benchmarks and overlay that with our risk assessments. So if companies are sourcing from high-risk countries and they are sourcing certified material from high-risk countries, we would, through the sustainability framework, only look at where the certification schemes they are using are not covering high-risk issues, and we would then cover that under the sustainability program. So in that way, instead of inventing a new certification system evaluating everything, we would recognize existing certifications, coverage of specific issues, but then focus on critical gaps where there are also risks identified in the source area. So that's how we will try to integrate the sustainability framework with existing schemes and the current market landscapes. For some commodities, for example, beef cattle, and also there is very limited certification options actually. So whereas, for example, in timber, there are a number of established certification schemes. So it will be very different how we approach those commodities in applying the framework. This is the last slide. So I just wanted to highlight the sourcing hub. It has a lot of risk assessments, specifically for timber, but also actually risk assessments that go beyond legality for beef, soy, and palm oil. So I just recommend that you highlight this and use this as a source of information for risk assessments for these commodities. Thank you.